Hey, Carol, guess what I saw in my protege this morning? Not the big garden, up by the house in the protege.
Garden fairies?
I wish. No, I saw a fox up close and personal. He
Wow.
or she, yeah, wow. He or she was up where I was watering, and I guess I disturbed it. And I saw this flash of gray and orange, and I thought, what? And then I saw it run away in the lower pasture. They are fast, very fast.
They are very fast. I saw one once in my backyard, which is unusual because I have a fenced in backyard. And I thought, what? And it was a fox. And I've seen their scat too. Yuck.
Yeah, I guess not having a dog brings a lot of animals to your yard, like
Uh,
armadillos,
nope.
squirrels,
Yep.
rabbits,
Yep.
deer, the
No,
whole cacophony.
that's a lot.
Yeah, but
But I'm going to get us started. We could have a whole episode just about animals, but this is a gardening podcast. So I'm going to get us started.
it is.
Welcome to the Garden Angelist, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana. I have a suburban garden measured in square feet. It's about a third of an acre.
And I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma, where I garden an acre and a half out of 7.5 acres way out in the country.
We call ourselves Garden Angelists because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening. We want others to love it too.
Yes, we do. And we aren't afraid to spill the beans and tell all our gardening secrets, the good, the bad, and often the ugly. But that's enough of who, what, when, where. Let's move on to this week's episode. Goodness, Carol, you've been busy in your garden.
Well, it seems like I've been busy. We recorded 6 days ago. This is a rare Thursday recording. So, in my own garden, we had a couple of hot days and I went out early and, like fill a bag full of stuff that doesn't belong on the compost pile, throw it in the trash. Did that several mornings, been harvesting. I went to see a friend's garden one morning. He's got this older house in Old Town Greenwood and he's been fixing it up a little at a time and doing the garden a little at a time. I've sent him perennials and stuff. And since he doesn't live there full time, it kind of has to be time. So, but it's coming along. And then I
Good.
went up to my sister's on the west side and we toured her garden because that's what we do. That's what we do. And it also looks good. They have this little area that's done in with a picket fence and they're redoing all that. She has an oak tree with a problem and I gave her the information. I think she's going to send the leaves to Purdue. I think it's anthracnose. I don't think it's fatal. But she also had wisteria that didn't bloom. She had one side that bloomed and one that didn't because she has two. And they're on this big arbor that she's going to paint. So I told her just to tear it all out.
Cut it down. Yeah.
Cut them both down. And I said, and then you want to try to kill the one that never bloomed on the one side. And then the other will come back from the roots. And then I suggested rooting some cuttings. And then I thought, well, I'll just root some cuttings from my own wisteria. So I struck some cuttings this morning, as they say, after I cleaned up the mess that the raccoons made when they had their sweet corn party in my garden. That's all I got to say about that.
As raccoons will do.
Oh, and our heat wave lasted maybe 3 days. I don't think it got to 80 yesterday.
Okay, well, here it's just been hotter than Hades. I mean, it's been 104, 103, 102. Today's 103 again. But when I was out watering this morning, I felt a nice north wind, and I know it's coming. So, hallelujah. We're supposed to have cooler weather tomorrow, kind of rainy. I am going to be working outside, and I just looked outside and I just saw that gigantic weed that I still have not pulled.
The one from last week's episode?
Yes, I just haven't had time to mess with it.
Oh,
And
I
it's
know
been
that
too
feeling.
hot. All
I
I've been
know
doing
that.
is watering the pots, deadheading the zinnias, checking on the new plants I sowed from seed, which are the small sunflowers,
Uh-huh.
and some mignonette. Have you ever grown mignonette?
I had bought the seeds for it with the that I was going to grow it. And I do think I'm going to grow it next year because I'm reading too many old gardening books where they just sing the praises of mignonette or whatever it's called.
It has taken forever to get going, but but it's easy. You just grow it direct outside. You sow the seeds outside, and it's finally getting bigger. And they say it doesn't look like much, but it smells amazing. So I'm ready for that. And if people notice that my voice is raspy, I have changed to the new microphone. It's the same as Carol's, but I have asthma, mast cell issues. So I have kind of a raspy voice sometimes, especially when guess what's blooming in Oklahoma?
I would say the ragweed is blooming.
Yes, ragweed and grasses, both. Yay! So here's my funny thing I'm trying to do. And I texted you about it yesterday. I have some potatoes, and you aren't, okay, I'm going to first of all say, you aren't supposed to do this. But I do things that you're not supposed to do a lot.
You bad girl.
I am a bad girl. It's my garden. I can do what I want to. So I have some organic potatoes that are in
Uh-huh.
my pantry, and they've
Yep.
sprouted. And
Yep.
I thought, I wonder, after watching Gardener's World and watching Monty talk about getting some Christmas potatoes, I thought, Monty, I'm going to try that. I'm going to try it. So I'm going to put them in my cold frame,
Yep.
and I'm just going to plant them tomorrow, water them in, and we'll see what happens. Maybe I'll have new potatoes at Christmas because lately we haven't been getting cold weather until January. So
Hey, it's worth
why
a
not try?
try. Yeah. They're already chitted, as they say.
Oh, they're chitted. They're chitted and then some. So let's play favorites. What is your favorite this week?
So my favorite this week, I was out there this morning and I thought, what is my favorite? Who would like to be my favorite? And the impatiens over in the wheelbarrow said, us, us. So the
Yeah,
wheelbarrow planter that I had coleus in last year, Pan American Seed, I think, or Burpee, sent me a bunch of the beacon impatiens. And
which
I
are those
just
new
threw,
ones?
yeah, I threw them in there and they are doing amazing and they look great. And I'll tell you what, even on the hottest days, now they're in the shade and that wheelbarrow is not that deep. They
No.
never seem to wilt or show any problems. And, years ago, downy mildew almost took out impatiens completely. So they came up with these resistant varieties.
Yeah,
So,
downy mildew was terrible. And a lot of people used impatiens in their shade gardens here in Oklahoma because they are quite heat tolerant. And so I had to have them all switch over to either New Guinea impatiens or sun patiens, which are still great options. But these beacon impatiens, I've also grown and they do really, really well.
they do. And then I also got sent two plants for something called an interspecific impatiens, and they're marketed as Solarscape. And they sent
Don't
me
know
two
those.
colors for 2025, Pink Jewel and Lilac Spark, one plant of each. And I planted them in this little shallow container. And I'll tell
Yeah,
you what, it is really too small for them. And so on the hot days, by about mid afternoon, they are drooping, and you think, oh, I killed them. You water them an hour later, they're standing up tall again. I'm thinking, these are tough impatiens. So
good
they
for
get a shout
them.
out too. I would definitely buy these again. They look pretty doggone good for the poor treatment that I've given them. Plus,
So, oh, keep going.
oh, it
What?
just keeps going on and on and on. I have two little
Oh,
impatient seedlings that just showed up and started flowering. I'm like, well, good for you.
yeah, keep on trucking, as they used to say. One thing I had a thought of is that when we are sent plants for seeds to try, sometimes they're already on the market and sometimes they're not. So people search and see if you can get those because maybe you can't.
So
Maybe
beacons
you
are
can't.
definitely on the market. And I was talking to
I bought those.
Courtney this spring, and she said when they ordered the impatiens, that's all they send anymore is the beacon. She says you can't get the old stuff and you don't want the old stuff.
Uh
The
huh.
Solarscape, I think there was a new one this year, but if you look for tags and it would say Solarscape is kind of like the overall brand, but those are also quite good.
Great. So my favorite this week is my phlox paniculata. It's a pass along. I actually have several phloxes. I'll mention two of them. I did a video, an Instagram video on phlox paniculata, and it was my pass along version, which is pink. Mine's not the lilac-y purpley one that people pass along. Came from a lady named Linda down in New Orleans originally, as far as we know. A friend gave it to me here. And it just nothing phases it. It doesn't get mildew. Of course, mine's growing in full sun out where it gets some wind. So
Right?
it does fine. It doesn't have to have a lot of water. It is spreading. It spreads by its little stems, its little rhizomes. And then the other one would be Bright Eyes, which is an old variety, but
Yep.
it's just beautiful. And if it's in really full sun, it looks almost lavender with a pink eye. If it's not super hot and sunny, then it's more of a pink with a pink eye. And then, of course, I'm trying two more varieties, and they're doing great. But I just don't know if you can beat this old fashioned one. It's just great and beautiful. I also wanted to say that I haven't done very many videos this week. It's because it's been 104 degrees. It's too hot to stand up there.
Oh, definitely too hot.
So I just go out and water in the morning. There is no bill here. Yes, I could put it, put up my phone and stuff, but really I just want to be out there long enough to water and get back inside.
Sounds good to me. Now, the question of the week, you got asked this question.
I did. Okay, ready? I'm going to ask it and then you're going to answer it. Succulents perform so well in my containers. Can I leave them outside over winter?
No.
That's it. No. And why is that, Carol?
Well, first of all, in Indiana, they'll be dead as a doornail if they're not the hardy succulents that are in the ground. And also, as you wrote on here, containers are 2 zones colder than your climate hardiness zone. So, like you gave an example of agave, which we would not grow in Indiana, but agave is hardy to zone 7. If you have it
Some of them.
in a container in zone 7, it's really going to be like a zone 5 situation for that agave. And so it is going to die.
And let me just point out that succulents, when they get frozen, they turn to disgusting mush. And you don't
Yes,
want
they
that.
do. No, you
So
don't.
you can grow them in containers. They especially love terracotta. It's one of their favorites because they really want to grow in places like Phoenix, Arizona, or Tucson, places like that. So it feels a little like Tucson in Oklahoma in summer sometimes. And they do great here, but I bring mine indoors. And so some of them I bring in the greenhouse and I put them down under the tables and I don't water them. They might get a little bit of water from above, but I really don't water them because they don't like a lot of water in winter. And then sometimes I bring them indoors, but then they have a little bit of dieback. So mine, I think they would do great in a like your room, your sunroom,
Right.
Carol. So
Yes.
they're wonderful plants, worthy of growing, but you got to find a place for them in the wintertime. I will add to that. I did a quick story about my beautiful purple fountain grass that I'm looking at that's on my deck. And it is beautiful in pots. And I got the same question today. Does purple fountain grass overwinter, Carol, in
Not in
pots?
pots, no, but it might in the ground
Or
for you.
no? Actually, it's hardy to zone 8.
Oh,
So
well, you were tricking me with your hardiness zones there. No, I know
yeah,
it wouldn't be
no,
hardy here.
no, it's not hardy here either. It's not hardy in ground and it's not hardy in pots. But you know what? You should grow it because it loves hot weather and it looks really good in pots. But it also looks good in the ground here. And I maybe we should spend a whole episode one day on how things that do well in summer aren't always perennial. That could be another day.
That could be another day. One last thing I wanted to say about succulents is there are, and we just call them old fashioned hens and chicks that are hardy enough to live in the
Yes,
winter in the
in the
ground, people,
ground,
in the
in the
ground.
ground. Some agaves are hardy enough. Some agaves are hardy to zone 7. I'll be honest, I've never had any luck with them in the ground. So I just grow them in pots.
And my Indiana friends don't try to grow agaves.
Oh. So your quote.
Okay. With frequent showers and the warm August sun and the cool August dews, it is wonderful that even flowers should slightly lose their wits and their sense of propriety. Petunias run about, embracing everybody, and mignonette gives itself up to the pleasure of living, and my passion vine is clearly seeking for more worlds to conquer. And that is Anna Bartlett Warner.
I didn't even know we were doing a quote about mignonette. I didn't remember. That's funny.
Ah, I did.
We'll see what happens when the mignonette finally decides to flower. It's been slow.
Or as it says in the quote, gives itself up to the pleasure of living.
Yeah. So flowers. Bringing in houseplants or tender annuals you want to overwinter. Here are some steps.
Yes, this is more of our fall is for. And so I will say late summer is for starting to bring any houseplants or tender annuals that were outside that you want to save. And so there's three ways you can save them, in my opinion. In my opinion,
Okay.
you can you can take in the plant.
Yep.
And
Check
so
it for bugs.
yeah, it's gonna have bugs in it. Little
Blah.
roly-polies, spiders, ants. And
Ah,
so
so
you
many
should really
ants.
scrub the outside of the pot. And then if you can put something like over the dirt so nothing comes out, and if you will plunge that pot down into water and hold it down there, some of those bugs will start to feel like they're drowning and they will come out. But you've got to you have to hold it under there for a while till the soil is really saturated. These going like,
Hmm.
and so neither Dee nor I will actually bring in to the house. Now you'll put in your greenhouse pots, but bringing into the house is tricky business.
It is tricky business. And we had one friend that would take hers out of the pots, out of the soil, and then she would dip them in a Clorox solution, a really mild Clorox solution. She called it the solution of death. And then she would put them in new potting soil. Personally, no, never going to happen here.
Well, I think I know who you're talking about. And she had a collection of lady slipper orchids that she would take out in the
Which is
summertime.
why, yes.
And so then I think she used something a little bit stronger than Clorox, but she would dip those plants to kill any
Oh,
bugs.
oh, maybe she dipped them in another type of death. Anyway, there you go.
Yes.
So if you're going to bring them in, it's going to be some work. I did bring in one pot and I was having trouble with my Christmas cactus. It was miserable outside. It was a little too hot for it, even in the shade. So I did bring that baby in, but it was on concrete. So far it's not showed any bug issues. But most of the time I do not do that. What do we suggest instead?
So instead, what we suggest is if you can take cuttings of the plant.
Yeah, definitely.
And so you wrote an article about softwood cuttings for
American Gardener magazine through
American Gardener,
American
American
Horticulture.
Horticultural, yeah, all of the above. It is
Yeah.
not available online, however.
It is available online, but you have to be a member to be able to.
I did a non-member search. I didn't sign in.
Okay, so a similar version is on my blog because
Okay,
that's where they got the idea. I will find the link and then
you
we'll
find
put
the
it
link
in
for
there.
me.
The
So,
article's better, but the blog post is fine.
so that is, I have a couple of houseplants. I will confess, and I made a whole list of. It's kind of like the list that I needed to make anyway to go through of what I need to bring in. So
Hmm.
you can take cuttings of stuff, and we'll go through some of the things I'm going to take cuttings of. And
Okay.
then stuff can go in dormant is what I call it. And this is what I do with the geraniums, especially.
Yeah.
I'll let them stay out until they're starting to go dormant anyway, and then I just throw them in the garage. Give them a
In
little
the
kiss and
pots.
say in the pots and say, "Good luck to you. I will be."
Yeah. So there's a really great article. I mean, an article, a podcast episode from Sarah Raven
Uh huh.
on pelargoniums, which are geraniums. And I will find that too, because she explains that they are South American natives, most of them. And so she has some really good ideas about that. And one of them is yours, that they do go dormant. Don't do what I did last year. I will bring mine in
Well, whoa,
and cut.
whoa, Dee. What did you do
Uh,
last year that we're not supposed to do?
okay, about now, they were really growing and I cut them back and then I fertilized them and most of them died. But I talked about it last year. That was a huge mistake. So you're not supposed to fertilize them until later. If you cut them back, you're not supposed to water them much after you cut them back because you have to wait 3 or 4 weeks until you see new growth
Uh huh.
because they rot. So what I've been doing is just keeping them barely alive because they're unhappy right at the moment. And then I'll take them into the greenhouse. I will slice them all back, not water them. You water them before you cut them back. I will not fertilize them until I start to see really good regrowth in about usually January or February. So, and then I cut them back again.
I will put them in the garage and I've got this crate and I just kind of put them in there and then I will cut them back some and then I'll scarce look at them until about March. And then I think, give you a little bit of water. And then in May, I take them out and see what happens. And I've lost a few that way, but I've also kept a
Yeah,
few alive for a couple of years that way. And I'm up to 6 now that I have kind of lined up in my on my patio. So I'll give it a shot.
I have about 20. So I want to be clear, you're leaving them in their potting soil because there used
Leaving
to
them
be
in
a
the
thing.
pots.
There used to be a thing that went around that you were supposed to take them out, shake off the dirt, and hang them upside down and store them. I don't know where that came from.
I do. I think that actually works for some people, but again, it's one of those things where they need to be kept uh,
Very,
very cool, and so you need a cool place to put them where they're not going to freeze or anything. And so that's a little bit tricky, but I think that's a common method, and especially when people had like unheated cellars that were just like dirt floors and dirt walls under their
but I still
houses
don't understand why they didn't just leave them in the soil, but doesn't matter. Doesn't
because
matter.
of the
So,
bugs.
oh, well, whatever. Okay. And then so that's, I guess that's it pretty much. Oh, you asked me what will I bring inside? Oh my, the list goes on. Okay. You ready?
I'm ready.
I will bring inside my Esperanza, but these are all things I'm bringing into the greenhouse. That's why I have a greenhouse. So Esperanza, which is Tacoma stands, is the botanical name. I have several special ones, and I will be bringing those in. I have a whole host of succulents. I've really gotten into succulents, and I bring them in, and I've already said what I do with those. Then I will also bring in my night blooming jasmine,
Hmm.
but I really need to repot it because the pot it's in is outgrown, or I need to strike cuttings, one of the two. I might take in cuttings of a couple of my coleus plants, but I might not because they get mealybugs, and then everybody gets mealybugs, and nobody likes that.
Right.
I will
Nope.
take in my fancy begonias
Yep.
because I've got 3 fancy begonias. No, I've got 4 or 5 now, and then of course my pelargoniums. I'm thinking about all the stuff in my garden. I think that's it. I don't, I got rid of my citrus trees because I reacted
Yes.
to them.
Yes.
And so I don't have to worry about those crazy things anymore. And I'm really glad because they were hard. And my friend who got them, she's so excited about them. And I warned her. I said, they get everything. So just keep that in mind. And she was like, I don't care. And I said, okay, as long as you understand that. So one year, though, I took cuttings of a bunch of roses and then I put the cuttings and covered them and did all the things you
Right.
were supposed to do with roses. And I got more roses. And you know what? I might take in some cuttings of my favorite hydrangea, which is snowflake. It's a double flowering hydrangea panicula. No, oak leaf, hydrangea quercifolia.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Okay, that's what I'll do.
So I have a miniature Tradescantia houseplant that I bought this
Mhm.
spring. And that thing is huge.
I love
Um,
Triscanthia.
I'm just going to take cuttings from that because I don't want to bring in the plant because I know where it's at. It's probably full of spiders and stuff. And so I'm going to take cuttings from that. I have a small begonia that has been languishing in my sunroom for about 5 years where it never went out. And so it was in a fairly big pot and then smaller the plant got. I put it outside and it's still kind of small, but at least it's living. I'm going to pot that back up and take that inside.
Uh huh.
Uh, I did save my poinsettia and I'm going to take that back inside and see what happens with that. It's still in the original plastic pot, but it looks pretty darn good. I gotta say, it really leafed out nice and it's very full. I don't
Great.
know. I don't know if
Are you
it'll
going to put it
bloom.
in the closet so that you can get it to bloom? Because you
I
have to get
don't know if it's
total
gonna.
darkness.
No, I don't know. I don't know. The wire
Oh,
vine that I
wire
bought,
vine. Let's just talk about wire vine. Love wire vine.
you
It's
taking
the
it
best
in?
plant. Hell yes, I'm taking it in. Oops.
Good. Well, I only have the one. I'm gonna bring it in as a
I
plant.
have
I'm gonna
2.
debug it and bring it in. I've got that quick snack cucumbers and the bonsai basil that are very cute that Burpee sent me the seeds for. And I'm getting more cucumbers off that quick snack that's only, a foot tall.
That's
And
crazy.
it is. And I thought what I think I'm going to do is not bring that quick snack cucumber in, But I think I'm going to try to grow quick snack cucumber under a light in the wintertime and see what happens. And the bonsai basil, I'll probably do some seeds of that. That thing is amazing how much growth you get out of it. Little tiny leaves. I really do like it.
They're pretty, those little leaf basils. So
So,
I see on here that you're going to bring in, well, you haven't gotten to it yet. So say your next one.
well, the plectranthus. I have this plectranthus that I bought at the greenhouse, and it's
Uh-huh.
very variegated foliage and it had blue flowers, beautiful plant. I'm going to bring that in as a plant. And
Okay.
then I have a large Swedish ivy out front. And this
I
is
love
another
Swedish
one.
ivy.
I got cuttings from my sister probably 5 years ago and I rooted them and they languished in the sunroom for like 4 or 5 years and it just looked like
Uh-huh.
nothing. And so I took it outside and I took what I could and I just put it in this hanging basket. And you would never even recognize it as the same plant because it's lush and full. It's been fertilized regularly. And so I will probably take cuttings of that just
Uh-huh.
enough so that it grows this through the winter and spring. And then I'll take it back out
Yeah. So I have a
and
Swedish,
pot up a hanging basket.
I have variegated Swedish ivy,
Uh huh.
and I like it because you can take cuttings off of it. You can grow it as a hanging plant. You can use it in your pots as a trailing plant really
Yep.
easily,
Yep.
along with variegated ivy, stuff like that. And so I'll be bringing that in. I've got a great big pot of it that I use all over the garden, but it's also in a blue pot now, and it's just pretty. So I'll be bringing that one in.
See, I'm reminding you of stuff. And then last but not least, I will, within the next few weeks, strike many cuttings of that African blue basil. Because last year I thought, oh, I have 7 cuttings. Only one made it to the spring, and I put it in that pot, and then it's big and glorious. And I thought I need to strike about
Yeah, you do, because I don't have any this year, but that's okay.
anyway. And then I found a quote. This isn't the quote for the next section, but in the house, keep all your potted plants as cool as possible. They have but just come from the fresh air and may easily, quote, get a headache, quote, as Dr. Kane and some other people used to tent life have done when first obliged to sleep indoors again. And that is Anna Bartlett Warner again.
I really like her.
I do.
She's awesome.
She is.
I love how she words
Uh
things.
huh.
So, do you want to move on to
I
vegetables?
do.
Okay, so my quote is: use what talents you possess. The woods would be very silent if no birds sang there, except those that sang best. Henry Van Dyke. So, we are continuing our thing about finding out interesting stuff about from Kitchen Gardener magazine, because it was so far ahead of its time that it has articles that we find very interesting.
It does.
So, and not everybody can find it anymore. So, this one was by a guy named Warren Schultz. I know nothing about Warren. And he wrote an article called Fertilizing It's Mainly About Nitrogen. And when I first read the headline, I thought, huh? Because in vegetable gardening, especially, we constantly caution gardeners not to over fertilize with nitrogen, right? Because then you get new growth, you attract more bugs, et cetera, et cetera. But his point was that, I mean, this, and I'm just going to say it, this article is somewhat controversial in its approach on a couple of things about fertilizer. But because some people don't fertilize their vegetable gardens much anymore, other people do. But what he's getting at, and he also talks about chemical fertilizer versus natural
Right.
fertilizers, i.e., manure, seaweed, sewage sludge, things like that, versus chemical ones. And of course, his dad did fertilize with chemical fertilizer because everybody did back in the 40s and 50s. Well, not everybody, but most people did. Many people. I'll say many, so nobody writes in and tells me I'm wrong. But he has a whole block in here about choosing your nitrogen
Uh
source
huh.
that's just kind of amazing. And it's both inorganic and organic. So one of the things I had to discover this year, his point to the article is if you don't get the nitrogen right, your potassium and phosphorus won't help you much. Wouldn't you
Yes.
say? You read it too.
Yes.
And then one of the things I discovered this year is I can't use most organic fertilizers. I can use poultry manure and fish meal, but fish meal is a little complicated. Everything else, well, cottonseed meal, I could use that, and I could use alfalfa. But everything else out there is not good for me. Bat guano, blood meal, cow manure, seaweed, because seaweed also, some seaweeds have alpha gal in them, believe it or not, or horse manure. All of that's mammal except the seaweed. So I have had to switch to using some inorganic fertilizers because it is hard to locate, for example, fish meal here because I don't live by the coast. I live in the middle of the United States. So just something, I mean, throughout your gardening life, you learn things and sometimes stuff changes.
It does. And so here's the other thing that he made a point to say was the synthetic fertilizers make the nitrogen available to the plant much faster. And so
and can burn them.
yes, so the nitrogen is available faster to the plant. And so like he said, when the artificial, I don't want to say artificial, inorganic fertilizers, when these came on the market, he said you could literally watch a plant green up if you hit it with one of these, like Miracle Grow is an example. And so he said that was like a miracle. And so
that's why they really felt that way. I mean, because they were working with nitrogen that isn't readily available. And so that's why everybody was so crazy about the MG when it first came out, because, it did seem like a miracle, but it leaches into the groundwater very quickly and into lots of things, which is why we fight blue-green algae a lot now. One thing about this table that I liked was he tells you which ones have a tendency to leach and which ones don't.
Yes.
And of the inorganics at this time when he wrote this, which was in 1999, and I know they've made some improvements to this, but isobutylene urea is a low leaching one. Methylene urea is moderate. I don't think sulfur-coated urea, which I suspect is in some of those pelleted ones, is moderate. I am not an expert on all this stuff, but I have had to look into it more than I ever did before.
And I will say this.
Before I just threw some rotted manure down.
So again, and I tell people when I do talks, if you do nothing else, add organic matter to your soil and work on improving the health of your soil. And then you're not going to be reliant upon all kinds of artificial fertilizers because your soil is healthy and the soil is providing all the nitrogen they need. But here's the thing, and when they do like intensive agriculture and stuff, they literally have removed all the nutrients from the soil because they're not adding back organic matter. And so they become reliant upon these chemical fertilizers. And then let's talk about containers, because you and I both will use a chemical fertilizer in a container.
Right, because when I water, those containers aren't going into my groundwater very fast. I mean, they have to run down the deal. And I also am careful about what I use because I have to admit, they work better than when I did all organic in my containers. But I use really good potting soil and try not to over fertilize. And in my garden, like in my perennial garden, I never use fertilizers except for around roses. And there I can use alfalfa, for example.
Right.
Alfalfa works really great. And I use pelleted alfalfa because the ground up alfalfa, if you breathe it into your lungs, that's not good for you. The other thing is you can use shredded leaves. There are ways to get around it. Now, when you're dealing with vegetables do need a little more fertilizer, a little higher fertilizer than others. And of course, we're supposed to say before anything, test your soil.
I was going to say just that. It would be worth
test
getting
your soil.
Yes. And a member of my garden club, she had her soil tested and then she asked me to interpret the results. And I just kind of looked at it and I says, I think, it was for like, I don't know what it is for her where her hydrangeas were or whatever. And seemed like she was low on sulfur or something. And I says, go get a fertilizer.
Just add some sulfur.
Yeah, with sulfur in it. But the other thing I was going to say is these chemical fertilizers that green things up really fast, the way I think about them is it's like fast food and junk food.
And candy.
The plants are really going to fatten up big. And when you have a container, that nice, lush growth, that's, you want it to just tire itself out and get big and fat and healthy. And that's okay, but that's not going to be the best plant long term. And so out in the garden with trees and shrubs and even perennials, I always think slow and steady wins the race. I don't want big, fat, overfed plants because, like you said, I think that they, like you said, they sometimes can attract some disease and some pests because just like a very unhealthy plant, they can also. So you want to strike a balance. And I don't want the big, fat, candy fed plants. I want slow and steady growth.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to grow the biggest watermelon in the world or the biggest pumpkin.
No.
I mean, that's a whole nother thing. So he says the same thing right here. He goes, the decision, organic or synthetic. And then he goes, he said, I soon learned what all organic gardeners come to understand, that organic fertilizer is bulky, occasionally inconvenient, sometimes sloppy, and often smelly. But it works as long as you don't expect instant results. If you're patient and have time to build up the soil, organic fertilizers pay dividends over the long run.
Exactly.
So adding organic matter to your soil, even if you do decide to use a chemical fertilizer, which I really don't use them except for in containers and really ornamental containers. But I buy a good potting soil anyway. I used to use I loved Ladybug. Ladybug was one of my very favorite potting soils, but I just can't use it anymore. It makes me pass out, which sounds crazy, but it isn't. Well, so you just have to figure it out for yourself.
My sister's raised bed garden. I mean, she's just got one big, I don't know, it's a 10 by 10 block. And stuff is doing okay, but the soil is settled and stuff. And she's added some compost from her compost pile into it. But I said, I would go get a small truckload of what they call Mark's Mix or a topsoil that's mixed with mushroom compost. And I would get that early next spring or maybe later this fall and work that into the soil and just to kind of give it a boost because it just felt like it was tired. It just looked.
Oh, that's what's wrong with my cutting garden. I think it needs some more compost that isn't just mine. I did add some shredded leaves to it, and I realized that I kind of react to the mold in those now. So I started wearing a mask when I do that stuff. And I will also add some Back to Nature to it because Back to Nature is composted cottonseed hulls, and that's all it is, unless you buy the one that has manure. And I'll just wear a mask and spread that on there this fall so that it can have a chance to have everything worked down into the soil. It just looks tired to me. And you can and I think that that's part of what's wrong with commercial agriculture in the United States. I think the soil it's really tired, and regenerative farming is a good movement, and it's becoming more common. Yes. So that's just my personal thoughts.
All right. So I'll do a quote unless you have something else to say about nitrogen.
I'm done.
There is something delicious about writing the first words of a story. You never quite know where they'll take you. Beatrix Potter.
True. On the bookshelf this week is a book that I have not bought yet. You went ahead and bought it, and it's called The Tree Collectors, Tales of Arboreal Obsession by Amy Stewart. I know it's going to be good because Amy is a very good writer.
Amy is a very good writer, and Amy has also taught herself how to paint. And so this book is not only written by Amy, but it is also illustrated by Amy. And
now I want it.
It is 50 stories of people who, honest to Pete, collect trees. Or
something
like
Judi Dench.
Yeah, something. Well, Judy Dench is not in here, as far as I know. This is one of those books you kind of set it aside and you pick it up when you want to read something of a little bit of depth, but not, just to get you offline. But I'm just looking to make sure that Judy Dench isn't in here. She should be.
She should be because she plants a tree for every person that she loves when they die. So her property is full of a lot of trees because she's very old now.
Yes.
She's in her 80s.
Yes.
So so here's the thing I love about Amy. She is so good at looking at subjects from a different point of view.
Yes. And I went to a Zoom where she kind of launched the book, and I read her newsletter every whip stitch when she sends it out. But basically, she was at some event and somebody told her, he said, well, I collect trees. And she thought that was kind of interesting and unusual. And
It
then
is.
there was another situation maybe where somebody said something about collecting trees. And then the next thing you know, she's like, well, what should my next book be about? And her husband said, well, what about that tree collector guy? So she put the word out worldwide. She found,
Yeah.
and she had way more than 50, I think, but she found 50 extremely interesting people who collect some kind of a tree. And she's got them divided into healers, ecologists, artists, curators, educators, community builders, enthusiasts, seekers, preservationists, visionaries. And so, for
Okay, I
example,
just love it.
under the preservationist, she's got the chestnut champion, the camellia preservationist, and then she's got a thing on saving Japan's cherry trees, we read that whole book about the cherry trees of Japan.
It was great.
Somebody who's preserving apples, somebody who's just collecting historic trees. It's really
Mm-hmm.
interesting, and you just kind of read through and you're like, wow, there are nutty people in the world just like us, Dee.
I like how she said she discovered that the urge to collect trees springs from something deeper and more profound, a longing for community, a vision for the future, or a path to healing and reconciliation.
Yes.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And so I'm enjoying it. I've read several of these and I'm like, huh. I mean, there's a guy that he's actually working at the Houston Botanic Garden, but he started off in Madrid, Spain when he was a kid. He wanted a ginkgo and his parents got him a ginkgo. And so he ends up in the nursery business and then he ends up working at the Houston Botanical Garden and he marries somebody from Northeast Ohio who has, her family has several hundred acres. So he says
Mm-hmm.
tries not to plant too many trees up there because he doesn't get up there very often, but he's always trying to plant trees and he collects maples, including one. There's a rare maple. There's only 500 left in the wild, but he's got growing on his property in Madrid and getting seeds. And then they share seeds all over. And I got to tell you,
Mm-hmm.
I have friends that are in the conifer society.
Really?
Yeah. And so you go to their gardens and they've got all these different weird conifers all over that they
Yeah,
buy,
I can only imagine.
including, I mean, a ginkgo is a conifer. So they have a ginkgo collection and her husband's always grafting ginkgos and selling them. And so it's for real. There's always, if you can collect it, there are people collecting it. And Amy's written this.
That's the truth.
She said she's about ready to announce what her next book is. She just started a book tour for the tree collectors, Tales of a Boreal Obsession. So if you are interested, you ought to go look at her website and see where she's going to be because she is going. I saw she was in Miami and I think she's going to be in St. Louis. I think she was going to be at the Missouri Botanic Garden. She's,
That would be fun to drive up there and see my sister-in-law and go see her
yeah, I
speak.
don't know
I've
what,
spoken with Amy on several different occasions or spoken at the same place where she's speaking, and she's a wonderful speaker, way better than I am. She tells very good stories.
she does. And, she's really a fairly introverted person, all in all.
She is. She's quite shy. And I was supposed to go to that Zoom too, and then I didn't have any electricity for a whole day, so I lost my internet for a couple of days. But she's an introvert who gets out there. I understand that.
Yeah.
I am too.
So anyway, The Tree Collectors: Tales of a Boreal Obsession by Amy Stewart. I am pleased to, and we didn't get like review copies or anything. I had to buy this for my
No.
library. And I'd pre-ordered it from bookshop.org when I first heard it was coming out, like in February. It came out in July. And then I saw where you could order from a bookstore in Portland and you would get a signed copy. And I thought, oh, should I cancel this order and get the signed copy? But my local bookstore down in Franklin got credit for me getting The Tree Collectors. And I noticed.
And the truth is, you'll probably see Amy somewhere at something,
Uh-huh.
and you can walk up with your book and say, "Hey, Amy, would you please
she
sign
needs
this?"
to come.
And she'll go, "Sure, Carol."
She needs
to come to Indianapolis.
She needs to come to the art museum and be a speaker this fall or this winter. Anyway,
she comes here every so often too.
That's the book.
So, ready for the next?
I am.
Ready for the next quote?
Yes.
Fairest of the months, ripe summer's queen, the heyday of the year, with robes that gleam with sunny sheen, sweet August doth appear. And that's by R. Combe Miller. He was an English poet and clergyman, and it's from a poem, Fairest of the Month. He did not live in Oklahoma. It is not fairest of the month here.
It's actually fairly pleasant here in Paradise, but
Yeah, whatever. All right, dirt.
You found it. I just stuck it in there.
Oh, yeah, I did find it. I forgot all about it. So there was this thing on Instagram, and it was called the Girls Tomato Club Movement.
Yes.
And I'm looking it up again because I haven't looked at it in a few days.
So
it was in 1909 that it started. And she was a teacher. Her name was Mare Samuela Cromer. And she was a rural school teacher in the western South Carolina town of Aiken. And so there were boys' corn clubs. Did you read this article?
I did. It's like they had clubs for boys, and the boys could grow corn and sell it and make money. And the girls are like, we want a club too. So they came up with the Girls Tomato Club. And this kind of went through the South because I read another article about the same club in North Carolina. But these girls that were, I think the one article described them as living a very hard scrabble life. I mean, they probably were.
They did have a hard life.
Getting their dresses made out of old feed sack cloth and things. But they would grow tomatoes.
Well, those would
sell.
be new feed sacks, but yes, thank God for the feed sack people who made pretty little feed sacks so that girls had aprons and dresses, because fabric was very expensive later. Now, in 1909, it was rough in the South. It gets worse because the 30s were terrible. So in 1910, she organized a Girls Tomato Club, but she wanted to grow better and more perfect women in addition to tomatoes. And they wanted to create Southern food that transformed Southern society. And so it's just so interesting. It was from the roots up. They taught them how to can because they sold canned tomato products. And I just thought it was the coolest thing. I'd never heard of it before.
We'll put a link so people can read about it. But the Girls Tomato Club, and I had never heard of it either. It's just one of those things.
You just never know what we're going to find out when we're out there, not even trying to look. The algorithm tries to look for us. And sometimes it fails, and sometimes it does okay.
Sometimes you get a big old hit like the Girls Tomato Club movement.
Tomato Club. I love that.
All right, I'll do a quote. And this is from a poem called Out in the Fields with God. The little cares that fretted me, I lost them yesterday, among the fields above the sea, among the winds at play, among the lowing of the herds, the rustling of the trees, among the singing of the birds, the humming of the bees. The foolish fears of what may happen, I cast them all away. Among the clover-scented grass, among the new-mown hay, among the rustling of the corn, where drowsy poppies nod, where ill thoughts die and good are born, out in the fields with God. And that is Elizabeth Barrett Browning.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
Rabbit holes. I'll do mine quickly because yours is longer. I've been researching mast cell activation syndrome, which is MCAS, and certain medications because I'm on a new medication. And it wasn't really about gardening at all. It has absolutely nothing to do with gardening. But, you have to research stuff because there's just not much out there. And I got a line on some new doctors who have done some presentations on YouTube. And I was watching one even this morning.
Cool.
And Masha just saw a butterfly out the window. She lies on the desk while I sit here and work. And she was just like, whoa, it was a little yellow butterfly. So anyway, that's enough about that. What are you doing?
So I did finish up and write about Anna Bartlett Warren as the Lost Lady of Garden Writing for this past week. And I have ordered her book from the Constitution Island Association, which is where she lived across the river it was in the Hudson River across from West Point. And this woman and her sister wrote, between the two of them, collectively and separately, over 100 different novels and children's books. And for 40 years, she taught a Bible study class for the cadets of West Point. They used to come across in rowboats, and she taught a Bible study class, but she wrote a gardening book called Gardening by Myself from 1872. And like I said, I ordered a copy from the Island Association that maintains the property where she lived until she died at the age of 95 in 1915.
Good for her. And then I noticed you started listening to the Harry Potter books. Okay, can I just say something?
Yes.
I read all of those with Megan when she was a little kid.
Yes.
And go ahead and say what you were going to say, because I got another thing to add to that.
So I read them all several years ago. I waited until all of them came out, and then I just read all through all of them as an adult.
Yep.
And all my nieces and nephews were very into them. And some of them still are very into them, as I found out. But I just got this idea that I was going to, because July 31st is Harry Potter's birthday, and I was looking at stuff. I'm like, I'm going to listen to the Harry Potter books. So I just finished Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and I got to wait because the next audiobook is still, I got to wait for it to come off hold at the library. But anyway, so I was talking to my niece yesterday and mentioned I was listening to those again. She said she's been listening to the same book all summer long because her kids are a little bit afraid to go beyond. Her son can go like to 2 or 3, but he's like, that's enough, Mom, because it gets a little bit scarier, a little darker, as they say. And so
and they do. They get darker as they go on.
So anyway, I finished that, and then I went online and I got sorted into my house.
There you go. Megan and I used to wait for them to come out, and then we'd run and read them. And I read are there 7 of them?
I think so.
Is there that many?
7.
That one, there's one that's really dark, and it might be the last one and the 5th one. I read them first because she was still pretty little when the 5th one came out. And I said, let me read it first so that I'm ready when you have questions. So that's what we did. I had another thought, and it has to do with gardening. So Bill and I watched this movie, and it was Viggo Mortensen. And I'm going to tell you how I got to this thought. I thought about Harry Potter and how she based it on the Lord of the Rings series. You know, she used a lot of those ideas out of the Lord of the Rings to write it. Okay. The Lord of the Rings series, read those too with Megan and Brennan. And then I watched the movies, which I loved the movies. And of course, Viggo Mortensen was in them as the king. He's the king. And so I love Viggo Mortensen. And he has just recently, my husband loves Westerns. And he just recently did a Western that he wrote. And he also produced it and he directed it. And it was called The Dead Don't Hurt. And you're thinking, Dee, you're going down a rabbit hole. I am. But there's a character in the movie, and she becomes this one character's wife, and she transforms his property from this barren, hard scrabble, sad place, right? A Western bachelor pad of sorts, into this blooming floral masterpiece. And you know what's funny about the whole thing? Is it's accurate in the movie.
Really?
Yes. And so it's kind of it's a long movie. It takes a long time to watch, but the scenery is in it, and it's beautiful scenery. It was probably filmed up by, I looked up where it was filmed. I think it was filmed in California, but it might have been Vancouver. Anyway, so yes, everything looks very historically accurate in that garden. And it's both a flower garden and a vegetable garden.
Right.
And she works out in it and does all this work because he's gone for a while. I don't want to give the whole plot away, but he's gone for a while. And, she tends to things and it just turns into this beautiful place. So
And what was the
there you
name
go.
of that movie?
It's called The Dead Don't Hurt.
Okay. I'll have to check that out. It's probably on a streaming service that I don't have.
You know what? I just searched online and found it, and it was on several streaming services. Probably Prime is where we saw it. But I knew it was coming out because Bill gets the magazine Cowboys and Indians. So we always know when a new book's coming out or a new movie. And I said, hey, that Vigo movie is out because I just like Vigo Mortensen. And he plays someone who is from the Netherlands,
Cool.
but immigrated
I'm
to
going to check that
America.
out.
So it was interesting. So garden commissions.
I am going to it's water weed harvest, clean up some non-producing veggie plants. The green beans have been amazing, but the ones that are left out there with the heat and everything, they've turned pretty tough. So I think I'm going to pull most of those. I may leave a few to get the seeds, but I'm going to pull most of those. And I definitely need to order bulbs because my other sister called and she said, I want to plant tulips again at my condo. Okay. So I have to order some tulip bulbs for her as well. How about you?
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to be watering. Fortunately, tomorrow things are supposed to cool off and we're supposed to get a little rain. And then I will probably fertilize the containers one more time and probably the roses one more time. It's a little late for roses, but I want that big September bloom because I'm thinking about opening the garden in September. So I'm going to do it anyway. I haven't ever noticed it made any difference. And then I'm going to cut a bunch of things back, like my coleus and my salvias, so that they bloom again for September. And what else do I want to do? Let's see. I think that's pretty much it. I'm going to water and try to keep my poor little trees alive. They're okay. You thought mine might have a threatnose too, but I think we forgot to water them
Yeah, that could
one
be.
week and it was too hot. They started dropping leaves and I was like, oops, because they aren't very, they don't have deep, deep roots yet. They're young.
Yeah. It reminds me on the coleus. So I did buy this one coleus in front. I think, believe it or not, I think it's in too much shade because it just hasn't grown very much. And then,
Yeah.
but the verbena Bampton, like I said, it wasn't kind of what I expected, but you said you do cut yours back. I may give that a cut back and see what happens to see it.
It's kind of just wild
It
looking.
is wild
I took all
looking.
those seedlings and I put them in with scavola and blue days, and they look really cool in there with it. But it's kind of a wild concoction, but you know how I like wild plants. It may not be for you.
No, I do like it. And I have it growing that's got like this wire cage thing on top. So it's kind of growing through it. It looks kind of cool. I thought it would have more flowers on it, like the other verbena, like the verbena vanity out
Mm-mm.
here. I'm pointing out the window. It looks great. It came back. I don't know if it's from seeds or the same plants, but it's growing wild and it's attracting butterflies and bees, and that's what you want.
I think my verbena Bampton, the original plant, has some. I think it has some spider mites from the heat. So, because they get spider mites, those spreading verbenas do, which are different from the verbena lollipop type verbenas. So,
All right. I think that is it for this week. We want to thank you for listening to The Gardenangelist. Hope you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. We publish every week on Wednesdays at 12 a.m. Eastern Time.
if you subscribe to our free Substack newsletter, you'll get a link to listen to the podcast a day early.
And if you want to help support us, use our affiliate links. If you buy something after clicking through on them, we earn a small commission and it costs you nothing.
Or you can set up a monthly subscription through Buzzsprout or make a one-time donation through PayPal.
Thank you to everyone who has done so. It helps us pay for podcast hosting.
It was lovely to chat with all of you over the garden gate. Bye until next week.
Bye, everybody.